Moving on to step number 66 of the 67 steps. One more of these to go. It's amazing. This one was called Elvis Presley and the Persistent Widow, What Jerry Weintraub Knew. And one of the books on Ty's recommended reading list is the autobiography of Jerry Weintraub. It's called When I Stop Talking, You Know I'm Dead. Jerry Weintraub was a manager for people like Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, The Doors, John Denver, and others. And basically in the 1950s, he was living in New York City with his wife, and he leaned over to her one day and said, "Hun, let's move to Los Angeles so I can be a celebrity publicist." She laughed at that idea, at the unlikelihood of it. You know, they were $60,000 in debt and unknown at the time. And basically what happened was Jerry Weintraub read about Elvis Presley's manager named the Colonel, and how he used to get up early, and somehow he got his phone number and called the Colonel and asked if he could take Elvis Presley out on the road as his manager. And of course the Colonel asked, "Who the hell are you?" And Jerry Weintraub said who he was, and the Colonel hung up on him. Well, this calling and hanging up went on for a year. Day after day after day, Jerry Weintraub persisted with tenacity and just kept calling. And eventually, ironically, the Colonel actually called Jerry Weintraub and said, "Do you still want to take Elvis out on the road?" And of course, Jerry Weintraub said, "Hell yeah." And the conditions were that he had to meet the Colonel the next day in Las Vegas at a casino with a check for $1 million. And not to make this story too long, but Jerry Weintraub went to a banker and who was a fan of Elvis Presley, and the banker was impressed by Jerry Weintraub's picking himself up by the bootstraps, I suppose, and gave him the check for $1 million. And Jerry Weintraub eventually, like I said, took Elvis Presley out and became his full-time manager. And the idea of this lesson is that you need to be persistent. And it kind of echoes the biblical story of a woman who went to a judge and wanted some justice for her dead husband. She showed up day after day after day, just like Jerry Weintraub did, and eventually, just through annoyance / persistence / tenacity and commitment, the judge gave her what she wanted, some justification and some justice for her dead husband. And you know, there's some things that you can't be taught, and persistence is one of them, although it's one of the most important characteristics you can have. You know, this episode is basically about changing your instincts. It's not about what your thinking is all about. It's about changing your instincts, and you have to have the instinct of someone that doesn't quit. And you have to be relentless, just like Bill Gates. Bill Gates, from age 20 to 30, worked on Microsoft without taking a single day off, 3,650 days in a row. And that's why you also need to read biographies. You know, we've been mentioning in the past that you should read biographies at night, because if you don't, you're influenced by the media bias, thinking that success happens overnight. But when you read biographies, which are the long-form storytelling, you'll see that people at the top didn't just get to the top overnight. Matter of fact, they had a lot of ups and downs, and they put in their 10 dark years, just like Bill Gates did. And you know, Bruce Lee says, "I don't fear the man that knows 1,000 kicks. I fear the man that does one kick for 1,000 days." And you know, 50 Cent, the rapper, was asked, "Why do some people make it and some people don't? Why do some people quit?" And he said, "Some people get bored too easily and they jump from one thing to the next." And you know, you're not always going to get immediate results, but you have to be impatiently patient, or an IP person. An impatiently patient person gets started right away, and then is slow to see things go. They kind of are willing to slog it out. And you know, you can definitely pivot when necessary. Remember, it's survival of the most adaptable, not survival of the smartest or the strongest. It's survival of the people that are most able to change to their new environment. And you know, one example of that is Instagram, that started out as an address book app, and then quickly saw the writing on the wall that that was not the way to go. So they pivoted and became a photo sharing app, and were bought for like $1 billion from Mark Zuckerberg. So imagine if they had just pushed and pushed and pushed and tried to stay as an address app. Probably wouldn't have worked, and they would have gone out of business. and good thing they didn't. And this is about avoiding the black and white thinking, thinking that you should just always stick with something that isn't working. The answer is usually somewhere in the middle. And you need to be realistic in the things that you're doing, whether or not they're aligning with your strengths. We go back to our Eulerian destiny. You want to be pursuing something that has the highest likelihood of actually working out. And things that are likely to work out are things that are already naturally one of your strengths. And if we remember back to the PACE system, practical, action, social, and emotional, we're all a mixture of these energy types, but we're primarily one of them. And you should be focusing on a career that is in alignment with your primary energy type. And there's that famous interview or kind of clip of Donald Trump where he's saying the key to success is never quitting. He's met hundreds of people in his life that would have been successful if they just weren't quitters.
One of the most important things, never, ever quit. Never quit. And I've seen people quitting, and if they would have held out longer, they would have been successful. I've seen it so much. I've seen some of the most brilliant people in the world that never made it because they were quitters. They were just quitters. They would quit. They just couldn't take it. They couldn't whatever. Now, you have to also have flexibility, though. You can't necessarily say, I'm never giving up, and you got to be able to weave and bob. You don't have to go through a concrete wall when you can go over it or around it or under it or something. You have to have flexibility. You have to always be able to change course a little bit, but don't quit.
And Ty's questions for you at the end of this lesson are, what's an example of something you should have been more persistent in? And what's an example of something you stuck with too long where you should have simply stopped and moved on? Thanks so much for watching all these videos. I'll see you on the last one, number 67. Take care.